Okay, welcome everybody to World Farmers Markets Coalition April studio for our academy. Today's topic is changing the narrative, flipping the script on farmers market prices. How many times have you heard others, including your family members and friends, say farmers market prices are a little more expensive, or it's too expensive for me, or different variations? There's so much to unpack there, but today we want to showcase like literally the actual face prices of farmers market products are actually cheaper, and we have evidence for it. And we have our member experts from around the world to tell you about it. Okay, so I am Robin Moon from the Secretariat of World Farmers Markets Coalition, and I'm here to present our member experts, Justin Cantafio and Phoebe Stevens from Canada, and Jonathan, also known as Jono Walker from New Zealand, and Marina Faraone from Italy. And we're going to, after we hear their presentations with pictures and slides, and we will have a conversation, the four of them with me, and I will ask questions, and then you get to ask questions at the end in open discussion and Q&A. As usual, we will review our community agreements. I tweaked it just a little bit. So see if you can spot what's been changed. We will be here together to be present and engaged in the precious 90 minutes that you're allowing to be with us. We welcome and honor multiple viewpoints from literally all around the world. Disagreements and differences are bound to happen and felt, but we will hold our judgments and disagreements softly. And instead, we will bring curiosity in our differences and gratitude for the diversity we offer in our community. We trust everybody's intent in their speaking, but also acknowledge the impact and how they land differently on each of us. We will make space for others to speak, and we will also take space for yourselves when it's time for you. We will honor everybody's need to speak here, so we will think briefly in sentences and not paragraphs. We will be brief about how we present ourselves. Bios. Dr. Phoebe Stevens is a friend of us from Canada. She's an assistant professor at Dalhousie University's Faculty of Agriculture. She's a well-known researcher in food systems. She focuses on finance and other market dynamics and supporting or inhibiting transitions to more sustainable food systems. She has a PhD in social and ecological sustainability from the University of Waterloo. She has published a bunch of articles in different academic journals and other scholarly publications, and two of which we will be talking about today. And you can go to our website here. This slide will be shared, so you will have the hyperlinks. You can find out more about her work from her website. And Justin Cantafio, our friend from Canada, long bio. I'm going to go really quickly. 2023 Nuffield Scholar. Justin lives and breathes farmers markets, relocalization, and local food systems. As we all know, he's the executive director of Farmers Markets of Nova Scotia, co-founder and president of Canadian Farmers Market, Canada's National Farmers Market Association, also proud founding member of the World Farmers Markets Coalition. He's the interim chair. You have so many titles, Justin. Interim chair of the Halifax Regional Food Hub, director of the Atlantic Food Action Coalition, and advisor for the Center for Local Prosperity, a charitable organization specializing in relocalization. We're very honored to have you as our member. And Jonah Walker calling in today at midnight from New Zealand. We're so infinitely grateful. He's a farmer, a butcher, and salesman. He also has many titles. He owns a family farm with mixed livestock in New Zealand, where they moved from the UK a little less than 20 years ago. The farm has a bunch of things, including free-range pigs, sheep, chickens, sometimes cows, um, fruit trees, timber trees, sawmill, tree nurseries, vegetable gardens. And Jonah is the one who processes all animals in the on-farm butchery site. He's the founding vendor and trustee and chair of the Waikato Farmers Markets for 8 years. He's also the chair of Farmers Markets New Zealand for the last 6 years. I know for a fact that he's an Ironman. He does all kinds of um, traveling and physical activities years beyond his age's health and wealth. Marina Faraone from Italy, welcome. She's with Compagnia Amica Foundation, one of our founding members, a very important strategic partner since 2011. She manages the database of agricultural businesses in the Compagnia Amica network. So statistical data, reporting and graphs and tables, that's all Marina. She developed a price monitoring system for the Compagnia Amica markets. So that's an ongoing price monitoring infrastructure that is in the backbone of Compagnia Amica, and she's here to tell us about that. She's a statistics guru. She's designed and built the index of prices for agri-food products in her past life, and she's continuing to doing that at Compagnia Amica. She has a degree in statistical sciences, data science, data analysis. All those are up her alley. Welcome again. Okay, without much ado, let's start with Canada. Justin and Phoebe, please take it away.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Fantastic. Okay, well, thanks for the introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here, everybody. Where I come from, we're known for speaking very fast, so I'm going to slow down today. I'm from Nova Scotia, also known as Mi'kma'ki, the land of the Mi'kmaq people, on the east coast of Canada. And as Robin mentioned, I'm the executive director of Farmers Markets in Nova Scotia, as well as the co-founder and president of Canadian Farmers Markets. And so I'll introduce both of these organizations and then segue into Dr. Phoebe's work. So Farmers Markets in Nova Scotia, we are a cooperative. We're a nonprofit cooperative. We've been around since 2004. And the biggest things that we do are everything from marketing and promotions to creating resources, professional development, advocacy, and where needed, lobbying on behalf of our sector. So we are very much a sector association in Nova Scotia. And something that's become increasingly important to us is strategically positioning the farmers market model in the world of food access and food sovereignty. And with the most farmers markets per capita in the country, we are strategically positioned in Nova Scotia to do that. In the sort of conversation around food access and food sovereignty, food justice even, we found it to be very important to tell our story, and we do that very well. And we do that often with anecdotes and stories. And that's incredibly important. And that's something we will always rely on because farmers markets are so human to their core. But we also have recognized how important it is to substantiate what we do with real figures, real metrics and numbers that demonstrate our story and our impact beyond anecdotes and into the realm of the irrefutable of the data. So, we have engaged in things like grassroots price comparisons over the years, having folks go to, we'll keep it there just for a moment, having folks go to grocery stores and explore prices and then compare them in farmers markets. And we have seen for a variety of products that things are cheaper. And we also have put a lot of effort into exploring price fairness to producers. Our farmers and producers price setters rather than price takers? It's increasingly challenging in a province such as Nova Scotia that has become so commodified, where only about 15% of the food that we eat in this province is locally sourced. And over the past 5 years, we've lost over a fifth of our farmers and farmland. We are also the most food insecure province in the country. So it's a challenging space to be in. But something that I think is very important, and maybe we can discuss more, is not just looking at the price that consumers are paying, but exploring the price that producers are receiving. And that can be challenging because so many of our farmers can't afford to continue farming in a commodity price market. We've done an impact analysis of our sector. So we know, for example, that our small market or cooperative of small but mighty of about 43 farmers markets generates about $44 million for the provincial economy per year. That's about $40 to $42 per person. And that's similar to what we see on the other coast of Canada and British Columbia. And if you extrapolate, that means that farmers markets in Canada are generating up to $1.6 billion or more for the regional economy. We also are very interested in the economic multiplier effect of what relocalizing our economies do. But as a segue into my next slide, something that's been missing is important ways of truly distinguishing the benefits of the farmers market model from the globalized or commodity model. And this is something that has been shared across members of Canadian farmers markets, which is one of the co-founding members of the World Farmers Markets Coalition. We've been around since 2020. We're new, but most of our members have been around for decades, and we have provincial farmers market associations across the country, now representing over 700 farmers markets. So again, so important to us across Canada is distinguishing what are the benefits of embedded community-oriented farmers markets as local food infrastructure, and what are some of the data that we can start to explore to distinguish us from the commodity style supermarkets and grocery stores. So I'd love to segue over to Dr. Phoebe Stevens, who will tell you about the report that we worked on together.
All right, thanks so much, Justin. And hello, everyone. So yeah, as Justin mentioned, and Robin also alluded to, I wanted to share a study with you today that I conducted in collaboration with Vicki Madziak and Elisa Gerhardt, who are both researchers at Dalhousie, the university where I'm based, and Justin Kintafio, of course, who just introduced himself. So what this study does is essentially it highlights the importance of local food price data for communicating the value of diverse local food systems, particularly in this era of excessive corporate concentration. So in Canada, and I know in other parts of the world, we have a very highly concentrated grocery retail sector. So the top 5 grocery retailers in Canada control upwards of about 80% of the market. So it's heavily concentrated. And in 2021, kind of in the throes of the pandemic, we started to notice food prices rising quite rapidly. But not only were food prices rising considerably, but so too were the profits and the profit margins of these major grocery retailers. So this sparked a lot of public outcry. There were even government investigations into concentration in the grocery retail sector. And anecdotally, as food became increasingly unaffordable in grocery stores, we also started to notice that prices weren't changing quite as quickly in our local farmers markets. So we wanted to conduct a study to see if alternative food networks, in this case farmers markets, are potentially more resilient to external shocks like the pandemic than highly concentrated food systems like the ones that are dominated by these major grocery retailers. And I think it's worth noting as well that, when these grocery retailers are responding to questions around food prices, they typically point to things like rising fuel prices, supply chain breakdowns, geopolitical issues like the war in Ukraine as kind of main drivers. So we were quite curious to see, if farmers markets were potentially more sheltered to these types of external shocks. Next slide, please. So to answer our research questions, in fall 2023, fall 2023, we collected food price data from farmers markets across Canada, and we asked them for their price data from 2018 to 2023. We wanted to see how those prices changed, particularly after the pandemic. And we wanted to understand how those prices changed in comparison to mainstream grocery retail. So in Canada, we have a government body, Statistics Canada, and they collect monthly prices from the major grocery retailers that they then publish on a public website. So we use those numbers to track kind of mainstream price changes and compared those to the prices that we received from our farmers market vendors. So I'll spare you, thank you. I'll spare you the kind of the nitty gritty of the data collection and analysis, but I'd be happy to provide more information to anyone after the panel if they're interested. But really the point is that when we did the comparison, the majority, or 8 of the 11 food products that we were able to compare, directly with the Statistics Canada products, so the majority of those farmers market prices saw lower average price increases compared to major retailers during that time frame. So in other words, most foods experience greater inflation in grocery stores than in farmers markets. So we initially thought, oh, this might have to do with the fact that farmers markets are more sheltered from these kind of global external shocks. But we also conducted in-depth interviews with farmers market vendors to better understand how and why their prices changed. And they actually also cited rising input costs. So the cost of fuel, seeds, fertilizers, these have all gone way up. And local producers weren't sheltered from these increases. But what they did report was that while their input prices increased, their profit margins didn't. So they either flatlined or declined. And so this is a very different picture from what we're seeing from the mainstream grocery retailers who have experienced record profits during this time.
Phoebe, before we move on, I am going to interject and ask one question. Can you just take one of these products on the table and just talk through what these percentage numbers mean?
Sure. Yeah. So, okay. So for instance, so we broke it down between, as you can see on the top row there, we have the farmers market average year-to-year price change. So that's from 2018 to 2023. And we also did a breakdown from 2020 to 2023 to really capture those pandemic years. And then next to that, we have the Statistics Canada prices. So these percentages that you're seeing are the average percent increase year over year. So for instance, if you look at like onions, so the second on the list there, they increased an average of 4% per year from 2018 to 2023 in farmers markets. And in terms of mainstream grocery retail, they increased 8.13% year over year.
Twice.
Yeah, and then you see that same, well, it's even actually bigger, slightly bigger jump, I guess. So from 2020 to 2023, you have 4.23% and then 9.09%. Some of the products, it's not necessarily across the board that they were more expensive. Like you can see tomatoes at the top there. For some reason, during the pandemic years, they dropped in the mainstream grocery retail, but overall from 2018 to 2023, you're still seeing a larger increase over time. So I will emphasize, this is a pilot study. So we collected data from 250 farmers market vendors across the country. And these numbers are more kind of indicative. We can't say that we can't kind of generalize because of the small sample size, but for us, these are really interesting findings that are providing kind of rationale and momentum to do a bigger study, essentially.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So I just wanted to mention also so I was mentioning how, vendors actually experience declining profit margins or flatlining profit margins. And when we spoke with them, about why they were keeping their prices lower, they cited a strong sense of accountability and embeddedness as reasons why they didn't raise their prices quite as much. And so, embeddedness in some ways meant that farmers market vendors navigated rising input costs like fuel, fertilizers, seeds quite differently from the big grocery retailers, because they were so closely connected, right, to the communities that they serve. And yeah, so, basically, like to kind of sum it up, in the study, we argue that the lower inflation rates observed in farmers markets over the last 5 years of the pandemic highlight their potential role in food system resilience, because they mitigated food price volatility and they ensured more stable access to food. So Justin was talking about kind of the importance of food access, and obviously rising food prices hurt that. So there's an argument to be made that they play an important role, particularly during this time of, we're facing a cost of living crisis. So I think that the findings are potentially quite powerful for local food movements. But as I also mentioned, this is a pilot study, and what it showed to us was, the need for more kind of systematic and robust data infrastructure on local food systems, on farmers markets, because this is the only study of its kind in Canada, and there's certainly a lot more room for gathering more information. So in terms of, the policy implications, in the Canadian context, so last year, the Competition Bureau, which is basically the antitrust body in Canada, conducted a study on the level of grocery competition, level of concentration in the grocery retail sector. And they published this report, featured here, saying Canada needs more grocery competition. Not the most creative title, but it does certainly get the point across. And in it, they maintain that, current grocery competition is focused on grocery stores being the main place for Canadians to buy food. And they argue that it should be broadened to include online businesses and other industry disruptors. And they also call in different levels of government to attract international grocers to Canada, and easing any barriers to entry. But what's missing from this entire conversation are the ways that farmers markets could be better supported by governments to continue to improve choice and access for Canadians. So it's a pretty, this study is a very kind of topical right now in the Canadian context, because a lot of policymakers are grappling with how to deal with this cost of living crisis. And, there's also a lot of sort of frustration at the big profits that the mainstream grocery retailers are making while these food prices are increasing. Next slide, please. So just to wrap it up, I just want to emphasize, how demonstrating the strength of local food system obviously requires data. And there's a lot more emphasis, obviously, nowadays on evidence-based decision making. Policymakers really need sound data to inform and justify the recommendations. And so this is a glaring gap, at least in the Canadian context, when it comes to local food systems. So on that note, Justin and I and a number of other collaborators are in the process of applying for a much larger grant than the one that supported this initial study. And the plan is to collect farmers market food price data in a more systematic way. And so we'd like to start with one province to begin with, do it really, really well. And then we have our eyes set on an even larger grant that would allow us to roll that process out across the country. So I'll just end it there. I know that Justin's going to provide a quick example of how this type of data can, benefit farmers markets and inform policymaking.
Thank you so much, Phoebe. So yeah, there's just one other slide here before we pass it on to our friends from other parts of the world. So yeah, just sort of segueing and building off the idea of leveraging data. So the more data we have, the easier it is for us to make our case. And while funders often enjoy stories, in many instances, we found that policymakers need to see the cold, hard data. And so in Nova Scotia, something that we've been able to do is harnessing some of the information that we're finding, whether it's the impact profiles that we create for markets or this type of data that's demonstrating the way in which local food systems can buffer against inflation, especially at a time when Canadian nationalism and patriotism is surging because our neighbors to the south are threatening to annex us and have engaged in a trade war. It is very real. This is a very real time of geopolitical tension. The importance of embedded, resilient food systems has never been greater. And so one example of I guess, government policymakers seeing the impact and us leveraging our data to demonstrate that impact is something called the Nova Scotia Loyal Program, which was created by the provincial government of Nova Scotia to help increase local consumption of local food at a time when less than 15% of the food we eat is locally sourced. And the first place that the province decided to launch this program was in farmers markets because we could demonstrate some of this impact and we could leverage our data to demonstrate what this could do from an investment perspective. So last year we distributed over 130,000 $10 vouchers or $1.3 million to school children across the province. And it was a great success. And that money goes directly to the local economy. It's been successful to the point where we're expanding this program this year to include post-secondary education as well as newcomers or new Canadians who are coming. But just the power of targeted investment wouldn't necessarily be something we could do unless we had the ability to demonstrate that investing in these types of local or alternative food systems is going to have a greater impact than just doing it at our supermarkets and our grocery stores. So I'll leave it there and look forward to coming back for question time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Team Canada. Thank you so much. And we will talk about, I have a bunch of questions. Hopefully we'll get to some of them. And some of them have to do with tariffs, and it's a terrible time, and we're sorry. Jono from New Zealand is next. So this study, compared to the Canadian study that's just been presented to you, this is a study that's been done at the Farmers Markets Association level, closer to the ground, and really showing you nitty-gritty of how it was done and how it can be done. It does not require a PhD degree for us to be doing this. So that's also very, very exciting to see the other side of the other dimension of this kind of price comparison study. Jono, please take it away.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Yeah, there's certainly no PhD people involved in this. It's very grassroots and feet on the ground. So the driver behind this was that we want, there are about 26 farmers markets in New Zealand, and they haven't been around for very long. The oldest is only about 26, 27 years. We'd like a lot more farmers markets. We'd like more vendors selling at farmers markets, and we'd like a lot more customers. So one of the barriers, of course, like a lot of people mention, is that people feel or think that or claim that farmers markets are more expensive. So I simply wanted to test that, and came up with a way of doing it using a simple spreadsheet. But some of our market managers, because I've co-opted others to do it at the same time, I've done it longhand. So you don't have to use a spreadsheet, just makes it much more easy. So the general idea is to focus on whatever is seasonal and fresh at the moment when you do your comparison at the market. So a range of fresh fruits and vegetables, whatever's there, plus other staple foods. So that might include things like meat, fish, cheese, eggs, and bread, that type of thing, that not the fancy stuff, just the basic things that might fill up a basket for someone. And the only thing we were looking at was the price, not the quality, the freshness, none of that, just the cost of what was for sale on that day. So I did this on my own a couple of times at the local market where I sell, and I just scooted around the market just before it opened with a notepad and just jotted down prices. If there are 3 or 4 vendors selling the same thing, that's great. All the prices were noted down, and then the spreadsheet will average them. Once I'd done that, after the market closed, I went to the 2 closest supermarkets to the farmers market. And then I did the same thing there, matching what I found at the farmers market with a like for like product at the supermarket. It was one of the things that was very quickly evident was that there's far more choice at the farmers market. So there are a lot of things that we were getting at the farmers market that we couldn't find an equivalent of at the supermarket. So we had to just knock some of those things off the list. It was also incredibly important to compare like with like. So you don't compare an organic apple from the farmer's market with a non-organic apple at the supermarket, that type of thing. So comparing like with like is no good comparing stuff that's very different in production method or cost. So once we'd collected that data, the 2 sets of prices, one from the supermarket, 2 supermarkets, one from the farmer's market, all those prices are added into the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet averages the price for the same item and then totals it. Now, the total cost of what you might call a basket of food is irrelevant. It doesn't matter what it costs. And we decided to try and, once we had tested this at my own markets, we roll this out and roped in other market managers around the country. So we've done it about 4 times now nationally, and up to about a dozen different markets have done this comparison on the same day. So that gives us a good idea of what's happening around the country. And once we'd collected that data, we worked it into the spreadsheet and looked at the difference between the total basket cost at the farmer's market and the supermarket. So it doesn't matter the cost of the basket, because one market will have far more in their basket or different products to another market. That's irrelevant. It's just the difference between the farmer's market basket and the supermarket basket. So we carefully had to sort of check through the data that was sent. One of the things that people tended to do was put too much sort of too many products in that weren't what you might call staple, some more fancy foods. So they were knocked out. We just kept it as basic as possible. And the interesting thing was, on almost all occasions, the farmers market came out cheaper. And that was really interesting and reassuring. We had the odd occasion where the supermarket was a little cheaper, and that was because if there was a special being offered at the supermarket on that day, the special price was used, otherwise it wouldn't be realistic. But on almost all cases, the farmers market was cheaper. Now, the time involved wasn't massive. It would probably take me 20 minutes to walk around the farmers market, jotting down prices, 20 minutes at each supermarket, plus traveling there, and then maybe half an hour to put it onto a spreadsheet when I got home. So it's not a massive undertaking. And I've done these now myself probably 6 or 7 times, and nationally we've done them about 4 times over the last few years. The latest one being this February, and we wanted to tie it in with our National Farmers Market Week. So that kind of is it. Well, there's an example of the blank spreadsheet there. Obviously, you can add more rows as your products increase. I just took out a lot so I could get it all onto one slide. But basic vegetables, whatever's in season and at the market that day. Same with the fruit. There's usually eggs all the year round. Most markets have some meat. We encourage people to do something really simple, like a kilo of minced beef or a dozen free-range eggs, that type of thing. A loaf of sourdough bread. But some markets in this last one in February, that's the sort of end of our summer here. So there were loads of fruit around, and lots of berries and so on. And the vegetables, it was very much the summer veggies. But we've done them in the winter too, and different sort of products. Obviously, some stuff's there all year round, but the difference was always the same. It was cheaper at the farmers market. So that's an example from one that I did at I can't remember which market that one was at. It doesn't matter though, but that was what was at the Cambridge market. There we go. Yeah, and that's in the central North Island where I live. We've got a decent range of vegetables there. As you can see, there's about a dozen there. Fruit, there's 4 or 5 different fruit that was on sale that day. One of the challenges is that often at the farmers market, stuff's sold by bag, and at a supermarket, it's almost always priced per kilo. So you have to do a bit of work there, making sure you're comparing the same. So if you generally convert the bag price at the farmers market to a kilo price, and then you've got a fair comparison. For instance, there's one thing I would pick out there. If you look down towards the bottom, Scotch fillet or beef Scotch is not really a staple food. Most, I would argue that shouldn't be really in there, even though I did the sampling myself. But beef mince is a staple. So that's a sort of example of where you've just got to keep an eye on what people put in. And you can see, that's all right. You can see right down at the bottom, the total farmers market basket was $114. The supermarket one was $139. So it's the maths is pretty easy. Okay, the summary slide. 7 of the markets there were 8 markets did the last comparison. 7 of them, they were cheaper, and sometimes by a large amount. 4% cheaper was the smallest amount, but 30% cheaper. That was a market over on the East Coast where there's a lot of fruit for sale that day. One market had exactly the same cost, and there were 9 in this sample, and one market was slightly more expensive. That was one of the Auckland markets. And that was mostly because there was a vegetable seller that was very highly priced, beautifully presented produce, non-organic, but very expensive, and it just pushed their basket price up. Even in that case, if the spreadsheet was adjusted to include only vegetables and fruit and eggs, and not things like meat and bread, all the farmers markets were cheaper. And that was what I was mostly interested in, fresh fruit and veg. So I found the whole thing very reassuring. It's not cost that keeps people away from farmers markets.
Thank you so much, Joe. I have so many questions, but I'm gonna keep with my own rule. We will keep the questions for later. Thank you so much. This is just among so many thoughts, it's really encouraging to think about how we can all do this. I think the matter of making the training accessible and simple analytics, maybe being aided by organizations like even, the World Farmers Markets Coalition, to really look at the trend of data. But this is just, I think often people think of any studies like, oh, that's research, we can't do this. It's going to take so much, so many resources, and we don't have that. But you just went and did it. And sounds like you're doing it regularly to actually be able to see the seasonal trends throughout the year. So we can all do this. That's really encouraging. And 30% is pretty huge. And this is February, this is before, New Zealand is relatively not really subject to the tariff threats. But even so, 30% cheaper is a big deal. Let's think about how we can communicate this to the world. But more questions coming. Thank you, Jono. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Okay. Last but not least, Marina will speak in Italian. So please, if you haven't done it yet, please set your interpretation to your own language. She's with Campagna Amica Farmers Market, a foundation where she works with the Price Monitoring Observatory to have this price monitoring all year round. And most of our members have been to Campagna Amica market in Rome, but there are 1,200 such markets. And this is like a really big deal to be able to do this scientifically and data driven. And we are about to hear from Marina how this is done. Welcome, Marina.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Good morning. As Campagna Amica Foundation, since 2022, we have been working with this price monitoring observatory in farmers markets of Campagna Amica. The aim was to ensure greater transparency and become an analysis tool for short food supply chain. We don't want to impose prices to farmers. Our goal is to provide guidance and support to them. Next slide, please. So how does this observatory work? Every month we cover, we have a survey coverage. We have 35 farmers markets we cover. The basket of products is a selection of the most consumed products. The prices are taken twice a month, and we take the minimum and the maximum prices. Next slide. So prices, how are prices calculated and analyzed? The national average price is calculated as a weighted average of the prices collected in the markets. So we make an average, weighted average, and the weighting coefficients used are based on the weight of each farmer's markets in terms of resident population each month. An analysis report on price trends and their comparison with large-scale retail trade is made. So we make a comparison with the larger-scale retail trade. Since 2022, we have always compared our prices to the prices of larger scale retail distribution. But since November 2024, Campagna Amica prices have been compared with the prices recorded by the Observatory of the Ministry of Economic Development, the so-called MISE. This observatory collects monthly approximately 88,000 prices concerning price levels for a basket. They want to calculate the price index, the consumer price index. What are the results? What are the results, especially compared to larger scale retailers? So thanks to this comparison, we have seen that first, fresh products, fruits and vegetables. Well, the maximum price of fresh fruit and vegetables in our farmers markets has always been consistently lower than the maximum price in larger scale retail. As to processed food, some of these products are below the maximum price found in large scale retail. Some of them are below. It depends on the products. It depends on how the food has been processed, which raw material was used. So it depends. It depends if they come from the sector, from the industry or not. So it's true that some products are more expensive. Some products from our farmers markets are more expensive, but you know, we have to consider the value of the product. The product from the market is different from an expensive product that is expensive because the price is above the value. So sometimes a high price is justified. So this is a diagram. We want to show here that for fresh products, we have the minimum price and the maximum price. We can see this gap, this huge gap. We have a bunch of low price products and a lot of products with a very high price. We are inside this gap, but our prices tend to be low. As to processed food, as you can see in the diagram, some products are included in the gap, and there are other products such as yogurt, flour, and pasta, whose price is above. And so these are the only products exceeding large scale retail prices, maximum prices. But this once again is due to the same thing that we said earlier on. So, you know, the yogurt is more expensive because the value of the yogurt sold there is actually higher.
Okay. Thank you so much. I find it astounding to see the prices of vegetables and all other except yogurt, flour, and pasta are this much lower than the supermarket. And yogurt, flour, pasta, I can imagine why those prices are exceptional. 77% higher for pasta, that's pretty high. But I am wondering, okay, I'm going to ask this question. I think the question that I have about your work, Marina, is about communication. How do you communicate this? But I'm going to stop sharing screen. Thank you so much again for our speakers. We're going to have a very brief conversation with the speakers. Manuel, can we have the spotlights on our speakers? You don't have to put that on me. And then we are gonna open this up to all of you to ask questions. Justin and Phoebe, so the next step, so you told us about the next step of the next step for your study. I'm guessing very soon there's going to be a big difference. Hold on one second. Trying to open my camera. Okay. There's going to be a big difference in prices for supermarkets after the tariffs. Do you think that you will be able to follow the trends like the pre-tariff and post-tariff, and how much of the price increase for the supermarket items are due to tariffs, and how farmers markets prices will hold, I'm hoping, steady and even lower relatively. How do you think that that's going to show up in your study?
Phoebe, I'll let you answer that one.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so I think it's going to be pretty significant. And I mean, one of the challenges that we face obviously in Canada is the growing season, right? So our plan for this next step is to collect data on a weekly basis from different farmers market vendors within one specific province. So this is really modeled off of the USDA, the US Department of Agriculture has a farmers market. I forget what it's called exactly, but they do this. They track farmers market prices on a weekly basis for specific states. And depending on where the state is, it's, like they're not necessarily collecting the data throughout the winter months. So I think that's something we need to think about, because when we were planning this next phase, the tariffs weren't even on the table. That wasn't an issue we were dealing with. So that's a really interesting twist. I think it's going to definitely change the data and what that looks like. I'm not sure that we will be in a position to do kind of a pre-tariff comparison, but Statistics Canada will be collecting that their own data on the mainstream kind of grocery retailers pre-tariffs and then post-tariffs. But I think what'll be the most interesting really is the comparison between the mainstream grocery retailers and the farmers markets and how they respond to those tariffs. But again, like given the findings that we came across in that first study, I anticipate there will be some increase in farmers market prices that just won't be as high as what we're going to see in the mainstream retailers. And then there's also a big move right now amongst Canadians to buy local. Or to just not buy American. So even when you go to a mainstream grocery retail store, they'll say, Mexican celery. And then there's the US celery next to it, and no one's touching the US celery. So it's just kind of interesting. But yeah, there's, so I don't know, to answer your question, I think it's going to be like a really powerful finding for our study and not something that we'd anticipated.
I think in the research term, natural experiment. So this point in time, this tariff will happen, and it's going to be like a disrupt this series. Price from here to here, it's gonna jump up. I'm wondering. This is my second and last question, just due to time limitation. I'm wondering if there are opportunities for you, Phoebe, and others like you in the research world to collaborate with farmers markets, like now, to understand the pricing that you have now before the tariff actually hits. And I think if I'm very, again, encouraged by Jono's example, this might actually be possible. You don't need a whole year to plan this. And with Justin's organizing power, can Canadian farmers markets help to collect data now so that you do have the pricing, and then you look at the post and what that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, from our perspectives, like as researchers, it's totally possible. It comes down to a question of capacity. So that's more of a Justin answer, I suppose.
Just one more thing to add to your plate, Justin. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, it is always challenging. Of course, it's important when we do these types of studies to be mindful of the limited HR capacity that a lot of our farmers markets have. In our neck of the woods, for example, a significant portion of our markets are run off volunteer time. So we try to be mindful of ways that we can make these types of studies easy and straightforward. And also, it's important that we find ways to mobilize the data once we have it so that it gets used and it doesn't just collect dust or go
Yes.
on LinkedIn. It needs to be mobilized into the community. So
I'm totally going to go there. Yes, absolutely. The next question, segue to Jono. I think maybe, Jono, you need to be an advisor here to help our Canadians or others. I know the US has, I think Dar is here. US has done a study like this. Is Australia here in the room? There's been studies like that. Is this possible for on-the-ground expert like you, Jono, to explain the level of effort of this kind of study and how to actually like do this? Can you just tell us a little bit more about, you said it wasn't really a lot of effort at all, but can you quantify, like, what does that mean? How much time, how many days did you have to prepare? And it happened on that day, and you do this how many times a year? How many people are involved? How much time was spent in analyzing your data, so on and so forth?
Very little preparation on my part, which is generally my approach to life. I'd be more than willing to go to Canada and do it for them. Actually, I'd love to go to Nova Scotia. So it takes. I mean, the spreadsheet, it just sits on the computer. I take a notebook to the market. Takes literally about 20 minutes to walk around the market, jotting down prices. Same at the supermarkets. When I get home, the input of the data takes a little bit more time, but well under an hour. So, and then so I've done. That's when, if I do it myself, if I organize other markets to do it all on the same day, there's a bit more work then when a market will email me their results, and they'll either have filled in the spreadsheet themselves or they'll send me the raw data if they're not very techy, and I'll put it onto a spreadsheet, and that might take less than half an hour. Really, it's really simple. It doesn't take a lot of work. It's just looking at prices. It's great in the supermarket because you get all sorts of weird looks from staff, because you're walking around with a notebook, obviously writing down lots of prices, and people want to come and ask you what you're doing, but nobody has yet. And that's quite good fun. But no, it's really simple. It really is. The main thing to get across to people is the comparing like with like. That is crucial. Otherwise, your price comparison is just not balanced. So you've got to make sure you're comparing the like with like in terms of what it is, and also the quantity and therefore price. So that's there's got a few guidelines there are important.
So that's my next question, Jono. Sounds to me like I'm imagining myself like doing this and like training train the folks to like go and do this. What would be the most challenging part of training for something like this? Sounds like the like to like. So I mean that's
Yeah.
like one of the biggest things. The most often I hear like, oh, like this is this much a supermarket, this is so much more. But I was like, this is not the same unit. So there's a bag full, and then there's a kilo, or in the US pound. How would you train your folks? How have you done it before so that they can actually estimate the same unit of volume?
Yeah, you know that all supermarket prices will be based on a price per kilo, so you need to get them to convert whatever. And a lot of farmers market, certainly in New Zealand, are selling by kilo now. It is getting much easier. But for instance, something like a watermelon will be sold, but on size. So the thing there is you've just got to get a rough idea of the size and compare the similar sizes. But converting stuff at farmers market that's sold by the bag to a price per kilo is important, but not that difficult. It's as I say, more and more people at farmers markets are selling by the kilo, and then comparing the same product with us. So it's no point comparing a free range organic piece of meat with something, and you know, if you know your local supermarket, you'll know that there's not such a big range of stuff in a supermarket anyway. So you've got to stick to the basics, because otherwise you just won't find it at the supermarket. So stick to real basic stuff. Imagine a young family that they've not got a lot of money, and they're just going to fill the basket with basic food. So that's the sort of way I approach it, not fancy stuff.
So, like, how do you then take a bag of veggies from farmer's market and actually weigh it so that you know how to like convert the price? Like, how do you practically do it is my question.
Yes, some managers have done that. They've literally
Okay.
weighed stuff, but they generally just ask the vendor. The vendor will know. He'll say, "Oh yeah, the bags are about a kilo
So
or
you
half a
ask those
kilo."
questions. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
I think lastly, for your comment about keeping simple, I mean, I think that I have research training myself, and then we sacrifice, perfect with the perfect is the enemy of the good, as we say. Not enough sample size. What's the standard error? Like, what's the methodology? This is not, perfect, pure enough, blah blah blah. And I think that we let that stop us from doing this simple study. And I think the way that you described in very simple layman's term, I would say the methodology sounds very rigorous to me. Again, coming from research, wearing the research hat. And I think that that's just a testament to how much we can do, how much we know, and you are the expert in, what you're doing. It's not something that outside research, no offense to Phoebe, this is not, I'm not talking about you. We do not need to rely on outside research expert to come in and do this for us, but you can do it yourself. And simple, something masochistic in us I mean, speaking for myself, simple, this cannot be rigorous, this cannot be true. It has to be harder because this is a hard work. And that is simply not true, is what I'm hearing from you, Jono, and that is what I know from my work with all of you. Marina, my question, so yogurt, flour, pasta prices higher. How do you use this data to communicate with your Campagna Amica members? What do you do with all the data that you analyze for the benefit of your Campagna Amica members? The interpretation, we have like a
Okay,
slight
so
delay.
the report that I make is a monthly report. Data is introduced in tables and graphs where you can see on a monthly basis if prices increase 1 month after the other. And you can see also the comparison with larger scale retail prices. Reports also include details regarding macro areas, north, center, and south of Italy. So there are reference prices regarding the area in point, the area in question. Okay, so we can use our data as a reference price for their area to understand whether the prices that they charge are included in the range, in the average, or they are higher or lower. Sometimes it's difficult, to set a price, to decide which price you are going to apply. So we share this information with the farmers. We share this tool because that's a tool that allows them to understand price trends outside their markets.
And thank you. Second question is a little broader, but really the question, how do you communicate this with your consumers? I know that Campagna Amica, Italians in general, and Campagna Amica especially, does an excellent job in communicating with your farmers, your consumers. And this is well, personally, my challenge when I talk about food price. So we're comparing the face value right now. This session is about talking about the face value and showing people how farmers market prices are actually lower. And Jono has shared with us sticking with price. That's all he's gonna look at. And there's so much wisdom and truth in that. You gotta keep this simple. I find my communication with people I talk to, it gets very complicated very quickly because I would say, well, there's a food waste and there's a benefit, there's a hidden cost, and there's all this million different factors that play that make the farmers market's price look much more expensive. But I already lost them after like my second point, because I have so many things to say and then people just zone out. How do you communicate this with your consumers that farmers markets prices are actually overall cheaper for you? Tell us.
We offered wrote a press.
Okay, so
After Marina, Jonah will go. Yes, Marina, please.
So in our markets, we have some places, blackboards, where we write the best prices charged in the market. So the lowest price of a tomato. We indicate consumers where they can find at which stall. So consumers know that farm sells tomatoes at that price, and then they can, tour the markets and buy tomatoes at a different price. But when they come to our market, they can actually find out the lowest price of a tomato or of any other product. They see the price on the blackboard.
Jonah?
The markets that engaged in this comparison, they used the results, especially if they were significantly cheaper, in all their social media and so on, to reinforce the fact that they were not only better but cheaper. The problem with that is that you're already preaching to the people that are already going to the market. So we did issue a national press release, and that was picked up by a few sort of radio stations, and a few interviews followed that, and that was more valuable, I thought, because we want more people that haven't been to the farmers market to try it. So that was the most useful way that we told people about the results.
What about Justin and Phoebe? Do you have anything to add?
I mean, there's a few things that are coming up that I've been thinking about. Yeah, in Nova Scotia, we've been trying to balance price data and talking about price data with affordability and accessibility. So when I first joined this organization 7-8 years ago, we used to talk a lot about your market haul. We had a hashtag market haul, and it was all about showing how much you've stuffed into your bag. And what we realized after a little while was that was accidentally maybe alienating some folks from coming to the market. Because regardless of the price difference, regardless of whether something is more affordable at a market or not, it's still challenging to say. You've only done a good job of the market if your bag is ripping at the seams. So something we've been trying to do a little bit is talking about every little bit counts, encouraging folks just to come get a taste of the market, just try the market. Our $10 voucher program with the province has been really successful because a significant portion of the people who are redeeming those are young folks who and their families who've never been to farmers markets before. So I think it's so important that we equip ourselves with different ways of telling this story, whether it is affordability or seasonality or freshness. The more arrows in our quiver, the better. And I guess it just quickly a couple of other statistics that I find really interesting that we can sort of measure and talk about alongside affordability is things like jobs creation per amount of food sold. So we know that there was about 13 jobs created for every $1 million worth of locally sold food. So farmers who sell locally generate about 13 jobs for every 1 million they sell, but it's only three jobs for every 1 million sold for farms that just sell to wholesale brokers. And then of course there's the multiplier effect. So affordability, but also that money staying locally. And then we know that multiplier effect in North America could be from 2 to 4, and I know it ranges in different places. And then, of course, the other thing that's so important is that a study in Alberta found that 40 to 80% increase in the price that producers are receiving versus if they have to sell to the commodity markets that can just control whatever price they want. So all these different ways of looking at it, I think, create a holistic reason why folks should come to the market. Because sometimes we can get stuck in a race to the bottom. I always encourage folks, like I'm glad that Jonah talks about apples to oranges, because a heavily subsidized pork loin that sells for 99 cents a pound is not the same as the pork loin from a pasture raised pig that was grown in an agroecological way. So that's also important.
Yes, thank you. It's one of the many, many pieces of work that the coalition also will be taking on and communicating, helping communicate this in the most effective way. Thank you again for all to all four of you for being here. Now we have a little bit of time to open to the audience. I have not been able to follow all the questions there might have been here. Thank you, Phoebe. I knew you had to go. We will follow up with you. Thank you so much.
Hi, thanks so much. Nice to meet you.
Hi. Is Darlene Walnick, I'm just singling you out from as a US rep. Something to add to this conversation about the studies that you have been involved with or you have known about in the US as far as the pricing studies? And also is Sarah Parker is Australian folks here, maybe to chime in to talk about their study results. I know for a fact that that has been done in Victoria as well. Okay, maybe I'm not able to, I'm not gonna scroll through all of these to see if they're still here, but we can also just go to the question. Richard, is this a question? Do you want to ask the question, please? And the others, please drop your questions if you haven't already, here in the chat, and we'll do our best to address all of them. Richard.
Thanks, Robin, and thanks everyone. These have been marvelous presentations. I have many questions, but one in particular that I saw, and I can't remember if it was from South America earlier in the conversation, was the issue of what sort of language do we use? Is it the value? Is it the balance between the fairness for the shopper and the fairness for the farmer? And every time I see fairness, there's certainly been the whole tradition of fair trade, which has been exposed to be not so fair after all. But the question is, does the language of fairness resonate in your community, or is that jumble of language that may not resonate. Value is one that's been heard. These are very complicated ways to frame when we talk about pricing.
Yorani, I think you're the one who
It was
mentioned
Yorani.
fair pricing.
Yes.
Would you like to maybe chime in? Oh, I just saw her. Where did she go? Oh, there she is. Hi.
Hello, I just wanted to say hello. I really believe that the word fair, or to speak about fair prices in the case of our communities has changed very much, because there is a long chain of families that are producing, and they have known processes that are completely different to what is used today. Even the way they produce on conventional agriculture and agroecology. So let's say that the word fair has to be understood like fair for everybody, because the producer has to have a fair price for them. And if the supermarkets force us to produce at cheaper or sell at cheaper prices, that's not fair. It has to be fair for everybody, and the consumer has to pay a fair price, knowing that he is financing and paying a fair price for the families that have produced whatever he's buying. Well, that's a bit like this is more or less the perspective that I have.
Thank you, Yorani. Justin, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on those excellent comments, and it's something that we've been trying to focus on in Nova Scotia, is this concept that food for all is feasible. So taking a sort of food systems approach, making sure that it's for everybody. So I'll just show you this real quick. I don't know if you can see it, but it says food for all is feasible. We've put this type of language on our social media, on tote bags, and we've been finding that it's resonating because it unifies food affordability and food access, food justice. It centers farmers at the table, but also the consumers at the table. It allows us also to talk about things like nutrition coupon programs, all under the same conversation. So food for all has been a really quick and snappy way for us, because it ultimately doesn't encapsulate those other words, and it doesn't pigeonhole us.
Justin, do you have that graphic you can share with us? And we are happy to include that in our post-studio communication, if you would like. Giovanni, Dr. Belletti, I'm so happy to see you here. Yes, please. And you can even speak in Italian.
Let's speak in Italian then. Thank you so much for your presentations. So interesting. I'd like to highlight one aspect that I think it's very important for the strategies to be implemented. We have talked about prices of products, but we have when we talk about products, we have to consider, the good, but also the service that is incorporated, included. Following on Marina, we can see that it's self-evident that the range of products that the market offers is in itself a great service. So it would be very interesting to analyze not only the goods, but also the value of the service that is provided and that is embedded in the product, and that the market itself includes and embeds. And so the fact that I can go to the market and find a wide range of products, fresh products, also processed products of a different quality. So that's good service that is provided. And I'm sure that some barriers would fall down if we managed to communicate that So let's try and incorporate our analysis. I think that we should also consider, you know, bundles of products and services, not only the product itself and its price. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, the real challenge at collecting data is hard enough, but really, I believe the biggest challenge is yet how to figure out how to communicate this and communicate this beyond our own bubble. Food for all, that's a universal language, but I do also think that it works much, much, much better for those who already come to farmers markets. How do we actually communicate all of this holistically and all that Giovanni just mentioned to the people who are not yet part of that community? I have one more question that I want to go, and then Carmelo, you want to say something, but Viola's question for Jono, but I'm going to chime in first. Did you take into account the quality of the supermarkets, including the study? So that's a very, very I think that's the beginning of, like, you know, how to make it simple enough or too complicated. If you're talking about face value price, that's all we really should be talking about, I believe, so that we can simplify the messaging as much as possible. And there is an opportunity to show the quality in a separate from the pricing point. So for example, I'd be like, I'm in New York City and I can see like immediately already price changing in my country. Farmers market prices seem so much more reasonable even to me compared to supermarket. And it depends on which supermarket you go to. But I'm looking at the same bunch of broccoli and the supermarket. I go to supermarket just to see the quality and the prices, just just for fun. And like visibly, it is wilting versus farmers market product that just got plucked this morning, before I bought it. So I think that there's actually a separate study that could be done to look at how long it lasts once you buy it. From the supermarket versus farmers market, and you can pick like, I don't know, 5 different, 5 of the same products and then compare that. But my dilemma, I'm gonna go to Jono now to hear your opinion. I think it gets really tricky to add on to, various things, including foremost quality when you're doing the pricing study. What do you think, Jono?
It's really easy to get distracted by the quality stuff. A lot of our managers that were doing this comparison would say, I haven't been to the supermarket for ages, and I was amazed and appalled how poor the quality was. And it's like, you're not looking at the quality, you're just looking at the price. But we used just the high street supermarkets. We didn't use any of the chains of sort of cut price fruit or veggie sellers, simply because we felt that most people use the supermarket. It's the common place to buy food in New Zealand. So we used that. But if in the supermarket, if they had a special on apples, you used that special price. Just kept it simple as possible. There's another comment lower down, a question lower down about how prices are set at the farmers market. That was interesting because it's completely illegal for vendors to discuss prices. If I go to another meat seller and say, hey, I've got my mince on at this price, if you keep it the same or something like that, you're breaking the law. You can't do, you've just got to make your own decision about what you're going to charge. You cannot have any sort of agreement with anybody about the price that you're charging.
Thank you, Jono.
You get locked up.
Thank you. I need 2 minutes at the end. I have something last thing to show. But before we do that, let's go to Carmelo. Carmelo, did you have something to say?
italiano. I think this is a crucial topic because, well, based on what we do in every country in which we operate and considering the farmers markets community. As you know, in Italy, we have started with farmers and we have established a farmers market system so as to guarantee also not only good quality products to consumers, but also to guarantee farmers that they can live on their products and do their job. We noticed in Italy, and Marina showed that in one of her graphs and diagrams. So we noticed that when we compare farmers markets prices and supermarkets prices, if we compare the highest price of the same product that is sold also in a supermarket, we see that it's always higher of the most expensive product, the same product in the market, in the farmers market. So we have made this comparison. And we have seen, that gap. So supermarkets, the minimum price of supermarkets is always lower than farmers' prices, and the higher price is always higher than farmers' markets prices. So there is a lot of speculation on agricultural produce, and it's in this gap where we can find consumers that are paying and farmers that are also paying. So it would be interesting to me to try and understand if this also happens somewhere else. So is it typically Italian, or does it work like that also in other countries? So I would like, other countries to make a comparison, the same comparison. So to compare the maximum prices and the minimum prices at markets, farmers markets, and at supermarkets. And based on what Justin said, I really appreciated what Justin said. Thank you so much for this insight. We in Europe, we live in a continent where agriculture is subsidized, is often subsidized, and is subsidized also the so-called great agriculture. So farms that normally sell at farmers markets are the ones that are less subsidized. Regardless of that, they can offer prices that are lower compared to larger scale retailers. So considering this, I think that we have to investigate a lot to try and understand how the global food system works, understand what the forces are, and understand who is more heavily impacted by all this.
Thank you, Carmelo. I think that we need a new collab working group on farmers markets pricing soon to come. Last bit, please stay with me for 2 more minutes. I know that this is already been spoken, and thank you for the segue. Speaking of fair price, and we're talking about, I know we're talking about the face value pricing, but also, so the price that we, the consumers pay, like in the currency, and then the price that the producers receive, but they're also hidden costs. So if there's one way to communicate, I know there's something like soil health and the nutrition, nutrient in the food and the taste and the freshness and quality. There's so many different aspects. But when we talk about cost that the planet pays, cost that the food system workers pay or receive, and then the price for the farmers and the consumers, they're the hidden costs. And there's an excellent it's like a less than 1 minute video clips that I want to share with you by Ipes Food, and there's a link to the YouTube that we're gonna drop, so you can also have it.
How much do we really pay for what we eat? While our food might appear to be cheap, we actually pay for it many times over. First, unhealthy diets generate a massive health bill. 70 to 90% of healthcare costs are driven by chronic illnesses, most of which are diet-related, like diabetes and heart disease. Second, keeping food cheap means keeping labor costs down. This means poverty wages and inadequate worker safety and protection, making food and agriculture the most dangerous sector in the economy. Third, the environmental cost of how we produce our food is immeasurable. Biodiversity loss alone costs 3% of global GDP per year. And when we pollute our environment with pesticides, fertilizers, and antibiotics, we're not only destabilizing ecosystems, we're putting our own health at risk. And the costs don't stop there. A huge amount of public funding is used to keep the system in place. So low cost is really just displaced cost. Cheap food is actually very expensive for people on the planet and keeps us locked into an unhealthy and unsustainable food system. But what if healthy food was subsidized instead of unhealthy food? What if food prices covered the cost of safe jobs and fair wages? What if we paid what it costs to protect the environment today, rather than passing on a larger bill to future generations? What if we shifted from a low-cost to a true-cost food system?
So with that, well, we'll conclude our studio for April. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you again and again for all the speakers who have come today and spoke with us. And we will see you next time. Have a wonderful week, rest of the week, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.